Lisa, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
You are so very welcome. Excited to be here.
So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I actually wanted to be a nurse when I was growing up.
Oh, you're the first person to say nurse on the podcast.
Yes, I did. And I actually started out there in college.
That was your major.
That was my major when I started. But
Mm,
life happened. And by the time I graduated, I was a business major.
mm, mhm. And how does nursing connect to what you do today? And would you tell the audience what you do today?
So I'm a holistic life coach, and how it connects to what I do today is, during those years of corporate, I was still practicing holistic living on my own, clean eating, supplementation,
Mhm,
yoga, was a yoga instructor.
mhm,
And when I had my first child and made the decision to stay home, after about a year of that and leaving from a corporate trainer position,
mhm,
I decided, this is just too good for me not to share.
mm,
And that started my life of certifications in the holistic world and
mm,
studies for many,
mm,
many years. And that was my first part-time business, entrepreneuring, so
mm,
that I could make my own hours. And my kids were always my priority.
mm,
So I would have to say that having that anatomy and physiology, having that knowledge of wanting to serve in that
mm,
manner, care for
mm,
people, be with people.
mm,
I'm using it all. I'm using the
mm,
corporate experience. I'm using my holistic training experience.
mm,
And I'm also using my marriage mentoring experience.
mm. So you kind of mentioned it. So out of college, you went to work in
Mm-hmm.
corporate. Oh, can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Sure, sure. So was blessed to get a position with Cellular One of Washington, Baltimore. And I started out also working part-time with them at the very beginning before cell phones were even a thing in the world.
Mm,
And I had the vice president ask me to come in and have a meeting with her. And she said, Lisa, we really like what you're doing. We would like to offer you a full-time position, and we're even willing to pay for you to finish college. I
Oh,
was
wow.
paying, I was paying for college by myself. So I kind of made that phone call to, mom and dad, because you still at that time when you're young and you're pursuing, to let them know about the offer and that I really was considering it. And actually at the time, AIDS was just coming around. And so they felt good with this decision I was making, because I wouldn't be in a hospital environment when there was so much uncertainty
Mm,
about that disease.
mm,
And so I went into business and I never looked back, and I wound up growing exponentially with the Bell
mm,
Corporation.
wow. So tell us, I'm curious, was it difficult to leave corporate or did it feel natural because you were leaving to be with your kids? Like, tell us that, because I think, I talk to clients who are wanting to pivot to make transitions, and that
Mm-hmm.
leap can be pretty scary for people.
Yeah, so I think at that time, what they had was something called the Family Medical Leave Act. It's still in existence. And
Hmm.
so, what that afforded me was the opportunity to take up to a year off
Oh, wow.
for my maternity leave and
Mm,
decide, do I want to come back or do I want to stay?
mm,
So, the beauty in that was I really got to enter into stay at home motherhood. And
mm,
what does that mean for me? And also, Lupe, I had my kids later in life. I had my
mm,
first at 33, my second at 35, and my third at 37. So by the time that decision transpired for me, I was pretty solid that, I had done 13 years of corporate,
mm,
and I really wanted to be there for
mm,
my kids and make my family first.
mm,
So after that year, I guess what I'm saying is, by them offering me that family medical leave, I kind of had that little cushion.
mm,
Do I want to go back? But at the end of the year, I said, no, thank you. And a lot
mm,
of people questioned my decision because I was on the rise on that corporate ladder, and Bell was great for women in business
mm.
and women in management. But I solidly stepped into my yes.
Into becoming a mom, and that led you to the work you do today.
Yes, it actually did. It actually did. So, After many certifications, what I first launched was part-time business, teaching around town and at hospitals. Actually, I did some
Huh.
maternity instruction for, yoga for cardiac and cancer research.
Mm.
And then so referrals started coming in from doctors. And then after about 7 years of doing that, I was introduced to the International Association of Yoga Therapists and went to a conference and saw that the one-on-one, the science of what holistic health does for the body, I started working more one-on-one instead of just a classroom or group environment.
Mm. Mhm. And then you found that more enjoyable.
Yes, I actually did. I loved that, being in service that way. And come to find out after I was introduced to the coaching world that I've been coaching all along.
Probably
You know,
throughout your entire career.
yeah, because coaching is leadership and guidance
Mm.
and being in service.
Mm.
So I was. And then I just decided to really pursue that with first that 6-month health coaching certification and then the 1-year life mastery certification.
Mm.
And really spend time diving into what does this mean as a profession. And what I loved is the culmination of everything that we've experienced, we bring to our coaching practice now.
Yes. Well, Lisa and I met through a women's group, Elevate, and we're part of the same squad. Lisa's the leader of the squad.
Mhm.
And one of the things that you mentioned during our calls, and that I'd love to dive in our call today, is your passion for helping with relationships, the topic of relationships. So
Mhm.
I'd love to get your thoughts and talk through that topic because I think that would be very helpful for me, just to grow in our marriage. We've been married 6 years, and I think there's always opportunity to grow. And I think the same can be said probably for most people. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on relationships.
Sure. So this started out because what was happening is my husband and I were recognizing both in our neighborhood and in our church community,
Mhm.
marriages were breaking down. And we were just wondering, where's the support for these people?
Mm.
What I have come to understand is a lot of organizations that you see out there, there's free marital
Mm.
support,
Mhm. Mhm.
there is divorced, separated, and widowed support,
Mm.
but there wasn't any support for those of us that are in the thick of it. There's
Mm.
not much of that
Mm.
until you get to the therapy place.
Mm.
But what I say is, why get there?
Mm.
Why not make the marriage powerful, beautiful, wonderful while you're in it? Because
Mm.
we're all going through seasons of
Mm.
life and we're
Mm.
going through seasons of marriage. Sometimes we're on a roller coaster ride with marriage and raising the kids, and it's like, hold on, right? So that became a passion of mine, is
Mm.
working with couples again in the vibrancy, not only of life and vitality of life and living, but I want that for you in your marriage as well.
Mhm.
And so, you're what I consider newly married. You're less than 10 years.
Mhm.
And newly married experience something different than the adolescent years of
Mm.
marriage, when
Mm.
the kids are actually adolescents. And you too may be in that 10 to 20 year
Mm.
season of marriage.
Mm. Mhm.
And life changes along the way in each part of those years. But what I don't want to see happen for couples is that, first of all, the priorities are switched. Okay, so the priorities should also be, if you're in the spiritual realm, are you keeping that which is greater first to you,
Mm.
no
Mm.
matter what that is? Are you
Mm.
keeping that first, right?
Mm.
For me, that is God. Do I have my individual relationship with God first? Does my husband as well? But then are we keeping ourselves second?
Mm.
Okay. So what I would say to couples and spouses, are you guys keeping yourself second
Mm.
behind that which is greater? And then behind that should be the children.
Mm.
It
Mhm.
really should be. And behind that is the job and everything else.
Mm.
And so what happens is those priorities get flipped in the
Mm.
years. Sometimes it's the kids first, sometimes it's the job first. And then what happens is you guys are losing sight of each other.
Mm.
And then when you lose sight of each other, you start feeling not so healthy in the
Mm.
household.
I love what you just said about these different stages of marriage.
Right.
We just had our second baby this year. He's about to be 6 months.
Yeah.
So sometimes it feels like we're just surviving.
Exactly.
He's still not sleeping through the night. I'm actually going to be sleep training this week. But it's one of those things that we're very tired. Sometimes our energy is
Right.
lower. I mean, I have a lot more balance now, like in the work I do. So I'm able to create space for myself to get a little bit more rest than I probably would if I was like in a traditional corporate role. But yeah, we're tired. And
Yeah.
so I think it's interesting how you just kind of just, I'd never heard that before. I agree. We did premarital sessions like
Hmm.
with through the
Hmm.
church getting married. And there was a one session on relationships, but that's about it in our six
Hmm.
years. And there's been a lot of growth of people who we were prior to having kids and the people who we are now. And what would you
Yeah.
say to newly married couples?
Well, number one, and actually this is going to be throughout the seasons of life, are you still dating? Or did you put that on the back burner when the kids came? Because again, you can't lose sight of each other, even as tired as you are. Number two is as you express to each other, I'm tired or I'm exhausted, you
Mhm.
have to figure out how can you still meet each other's needs, right?
Mm.
Because what couples try to do is the way your needs need to be met are different than your husband's,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And vice versa. But you may be trying to meet his needs the way you want them to be met, and he
Right.
might be doing the same thing. And what happens is you wind up not meeting each other's needs.
Mm.
So the
Mhm.
best way to do that is just to have an honest conversation about this is how my needs can be met. These are my top needs.
Mm.
And,
Mhm.
is it affection? Is it attention? Is it respect? Those are just some of them. I
Yeah.
have a series of 10 that I talk to couples about. Some
Mm.
couples are so familiar with the 5 love languages, right?
Yes. I,
Those
that
are,
it made me think of that.
yeah, those are good. They're great.
Mhm.
But I have some others
Mhm.
that we use. And what I'll have the couples do together is figure out what their top 3 are. But it's
Mm.
so easy to just check, okay, that's me, right?
Mhm.
But that doesn't help the spouse.
Mm.
So what I then follow up with, your homework is I want you to write 3 specific ways for each of those top 3 needs
Mm.
that he can meet your needs and you can meet his in this season.
Yeah, well, I love that because I really like the love languages book. I think
Uh-huh.
it opened up
Uh-huh.
something for me. My top is words of affirmation,
Yeah.
and my husband's is acts of service. And it's interesting how that shows up in our life. The way I want to show love sometimes is how I want to receive love. And it's different. We're different people. So I love that you said that, getting really clear on specifics
Mm-hmm.
on how, for example, for my husband, I'm a words of affirmation person. Let's say words is the way I want to receive love. It may not come naturally for him.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I have to do is kind of dig. Like I
Yeah.
cook dinner and I'll ask him how was dinner and he'll say great. And that's it. But I need a little more.
Right.
So I'm like, well, what did you like about it?
Okay.
But what would you say? Like, what else could
Okay.
we do as concrete kind of examples?
Yeah, so that is a perfect example that you could write for your husband to say, honey, when I cook dinner, I really would love to hear just
Mm,
without any prompting. That was
mm,
really good. That was really good. And thank you. And if your spouse does something for you, say the same. When during that time when the kids were young, if my husband was vacuuming, it was almost a darn turn on, right? Because it was like, help around the house, you know? So, but we let them know.
Mm,
We have to let them know. And what you're asking for basically is acknowledgement, and everybody wants to receive acknowledgement.
mm,
And so when I first left corporate, I told my husband, I said, honey, what you understand right now is the corporate environment. You're still in there. So
mhm,
you get your evaluations, you get your 3 months or 6 months or 1 year so that
mm,
you know
mm,
how you're doing, right?
mm,
I don't get that anymore. And guess what? I'm on 24/7,
mm,
right?
mm.
Once we get her into motherhood, we're on 24/7. Ever hear I need a vacation from the vacation because we
Yes.
take our kids with us,
It's not a
right?
vacation, it's a trip now.
No, that's exactly right. So again, advice, guidance would be, honey, we need to take a weekend away, a minimum of a night away, a quarter. That's a big challenge for couples in that new season of life.
Oh,
Either they don't
yes.
want to leave the kiddos,
That's me right now.
right? You don't want to leave the kiddos, but it's vitally important
Mm,
for both of you. And once you
mm,
get there, make that reservation at that nice fancy restaurant or pick that nice hotel. you're in.
Well, it sounds like one of the, and I've kind of realized this too, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are from our marriage, is that communication is huge. Well, in any relationship, but especially in marriage and that partnership, the communication
Yeah.
is so important, so vital. What are your thoughts on that? Because it sounds like through being really specific, we're communicating, we're being
Hmm.
really clear on what it is we need.
Right. So another exercise that I like to have couples do is create a dream journal. You just have one individual book journal that is
Uh-huh.
your dream journal. And that is just one way of starting an awesome conversation because you're going to go and revisit
A dream when you
when
mean like what we dreams that we had while we were asleep, or dreams as in goals and aspirations? A
second
dream.
one,
Okay.
the second one, because you might discover something new about your spouse that you never even knew. And there's
Mm,
that communication coming in. But another very important factor in communication is there's two ways that people communicate. One is listening to respond, and one is listening to defend.
mm,
And so learning those two styles of communication is
mm,
very beneficial in couple interaction.
mm.
What would you say the number one is in frequent conversation?
For me,
Well, for you or for people out there in general.
I would say probably to defend.
That's correct.
Mm,
And so your whole world changes when you learn to listen to respond versus listening to defend, because it breaks down that wall immediately.
mm,
And then we've been told you receive when you give. So when you step into more of the service, and that is what is missing in the world of relationship and marriage today. Most people are getting married to get something.
mm,
What is this going to bring me?
mm,
And that's a great loss throughout the relationship because it's not actually what am I going to get. When you can shift your focus in what am I going to give, then you receive more.
mm. I think my coaching experience has allowed me to like really work on my listening skills and listen
Uh-huh.
deeply. And
Hmm.
so when my husband's trying to tell me something that he cares about,
Hmm.
and I can turn on that really deep listening, I feel like it's really like a gift for him
Hmm.
because it's
Hmm.
an opportunity to give him my full attention. And I can see
Hmm.
and I can feel that he feels loved.
Hmm.
Sometimes when I'm really tired and I can see the difference in me being distracted. And so that brought that up for me of the gift that we give people when we fully listen, when we deeply listen. It's really
Yeah,
an act of love.
it sure is. It sure is. You're reminding me that my husband, one of the reasons why he said he fell in love with me is because I listened. And for a talker, you know, that's interesting. So that was a gift given at that time
Mm,
where, God was allowing me to not talk as much, listen.
mm.
And that wound up to be one of the things that brought us.
That made me think of listening to Brene Brown. I can't remember if it was on her podcast or on another podcast, but I think it was on How I Built This. Maybe he was asking her what advice would she give, and basically it was something like listen a little longer,
Hmm.
be curious a little longer. And that really stuck with me because sometimes I have found myself in the position where I'm listening to just kind of what am I going to say next?
Hmm.
And I'll remember that and think, okay, let me just stay curious a little longer. Let me listen deeply a little longer. And that's where a lot of the most special, magical moments where I learn something new that I didn't expect. And this happens in all relationships, coaching,
Right.
client, personal, marriage. I think there's something really, really special about that.
Absolutely.
What else would you say in this newly stage that we because I know there's a lot of listeners who are in this phase, like becoming new parents, trying to find kind of that balance, right?
I was just getting ready to say, make sure that you stay attuned to who you are and true to who you are, and don't lose sight of what your desires are.
Hmm. And how
Uh,
do we do that?
well, because it's very easy to want to put the children first
Hmm.
and want to put everyone and everything else first.
Hmm.
That is many women do this.
Hmm.
We are masters of putting everyone and everything else first.
Hmm.
And then we wind up losing sight of our own
Hmm.
selves
Hmm.
and our own true natures. And then we wind up getting angry or upset.
Hmm.
or disappointed or not feeling worthy, not feeling like I'm contributing enough
Mm.
to society as a whole. And I have to say to those to stay-at-home moms or those that are entrepreneurs and making it work, you're crazy.
Mm.
Look at what you're doing. Look at all that you're doing.
Mm.
I think they probably were tying back still to acknowledgement, but for newlies, stand in amazement at what you are accomplishing versus what you're not accomplishing.
Mm. Yeah, I know. I've seen that in client conversation. And then I've also seen one with stay-at-home moms, which I think it's so incredibly difficult
Mhm.
and challenging. And there's not as much acknowledgement and all the
Right.
things. And then on the other side too, I've have clients who I feel like they're not doing enough, like they're working and they're not doing enough with, so it's just like not winning on either end, right? The career is like feeling this guilt of like, I'm
Right.
missing things with my kids.
So that's what I would call a paradigm.
Mhm.
And you yourself have to enter into how can I have a paradigm shift in
Mhm.
this?
Mhm.
And one exercise that I like to use with my clients is TFAR as a coach. I don't know if you're familiar with that or
Mm-mm.
not,
Mm-mm.
but your thoughts create your
Oh,
feelings
yes.
create your actions create your results.
Mm.
And so, how powerful the mind, body, spirit connection is.
Mm.
So, again, it gets into that internal focus and internal dialogue.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because what you were just expressing is the internal dialogue.
Yep.
I can't win here. I'm
Mm.
working. I love to work. I want to be doing what
Mm.
I do, but I'm missing out on
Yeah.
so how do you switch that internal dialogue
Mm.
so that no matter what you're doing, it's a beautiful and wonderful thing?
Mm. I love that. Well, moving on to the second phase, the adolescent phase. What would you say there? What changes? How can couples work and make that a priority?
Okay, so during this phase, you may become two ships passing because during this phase, the
Mm.
kids are involved in a lot more activities. And depending
Mm.
on how many kids you have, so
Mm.
again, there's going to be that you want to allow the kids to have what they want to have, but it's the soccer years or, baseball. It depends on what the kids are playing. It could be the club years. So again, you cannot lose sight on how are we spending time together.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
also what might be vitally important is that you have quality time with other couples
Interesting.
besides just getting that time in. So what possibly group do you both want to get involved in just with couples?
Not with kids and
That's
couples.
exactly
Mm.
right.
Mm.
So, and I highly recommend maybe at this time that you both look into something service oriented.
Mm.
Besides the I'm all for joy and adventure, you've got to keep that going as well, but it might be service oriented.
I'm curious, why is this like a recommendation in the adolescent phase? Is it because there's so much going on in the newly
Yeah,
or
so
what?
so
Yeah.
at the newly, you need to be building on each other.
Mm.
Okay. And so as you're spending more time, as I said, we're entering into a season of life. That comfort level with each other is that foundation of the
Mhm.
marriage is being laid in those newly
Mm.
in the
Mhm.
new years. Like,
Mm.
and you're really coming into your own as a couple.
Mm. And so
Okay.
once you have that foundation,
Yes.
you can start adding.
Right.
Mm. Mhm.
More to that foundation. Again, individually, but as a couple as well. And
Mm.
how does that shift and change for both of you?
What have you seen has been successful for people to add that in? I can imagine life gets really busy. So yeah, so how do you work it in?
Okay, so the word I would like to share is intentionality.
Mhm.
So you have to be intentional
Mm.
in what it is you do want to do and what it is you do want to get involved in. And again, it's time and care
Mm.
for the marriage
Mm.
and each other. I'll give a perfect example. I love the story of mom was at home, let's just say,
Mhm.
and dad would come home, but the
Mhm.
kids got in the routine that as soon as dad came in, mom and dad went into the home office and they had quiet time. for 15 to 30 minutes. And that's their time to just connect on the day. Whether there was a martini behind, the office doors, could have been a martini, could have been a glass of wine, but the kids are getting older to understand where it's not the knocking on the door all the time, mommy, 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 or daddy, 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 and so that's us setting the example. The term I use is modeling. We have to model for our kids that respect. And that's just one way to get a downtime. Like my husband would explain before we had our growth in our marriage, in these new years, he would walk in the door. I've had the kids all day, right? So I'm ready to just download on what happened with the kids and or say, here, this is how you can help, right? So he hasn't had a chance to separate from the corporate and all of his responsibilities into the household and how it shifts for him. And all it was a simple conversation to say, can you give me 10 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes before he's walking in the door and I'm going. And so again, simple conversation so that when we entered into that adolescent time frame and the kids were getting older and dad came in, it wasn't so much of obviously the joyful rush, daddy, he loved that, of course, but it was before I said, because moms, masters of many things and multitasking and keeping track of everything that's going on, and here's the home and family calendar over here and ready to just go check, 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 this is what we have going on, honey. He's got to breathe, and so do we.
That makes me think of I think even without kids, before we had kids, I would get home earlier because I had a 5-minute commute and my husband had a 45-minute commute. I got there first, I'd start dinner and he'd come in and I just wanted to just kind of like rush with information on the day and give me attention. Yeah. And he needed that space too. And that's what we realized. We had some small arguments of, hey, I need a little bit of time. And we didn't realize that was what was happening at first. When we really thought about it, it was, I've been here for an hour on my own, cooking and decompressing. And then he comes in and because his commute is longer and then he needed a little space. So I think this can apply even if there's no kids yet or a couple chooses not to have kids or, it's just like this time for themselves. And it's interesting because now that my husband's working from home and I work from home, the lines are blurred.
So you bring up excellent point because that happened to both of us as well. We were intentional about still get your kiss in the morning, get your kiss at the end of the day. If you're going off into separate rooms, be intentional about never forgetting to say, I love you. Even though you're in the house all day together, don't think that that's just a given. You still have to share those very important little things.
And I love that you said that little things. I think this happens with any goal. And it happens for me a lot where I feel like it has to be something big.
Right.
But what I've seen consistently where I've had success is where it's been the small increments, small changes. So I love that because I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the relationship, like the small, I love you. What else could we implement that are small, practical ways? Because I think this is happening to a lot of couples working from home, trying to create space too. I have my office. My husband has his, we're using the guest room as his office and there is space, but also we're around each other all the time. And so at least for us, we might go to lunch, but maybe he's still working. I'm replying, there's not like an intentional space because we're around each other all the time, kind of like you were talking about.
Right. So again, what is the desire and or need for individual time? And what is the desire and need for the couple time? And the best thing you can do is get specific on it again. So for couples, I highly recommend, again, it doesn't matter what season of life, create a date jar. Okay. 5 things Lupe likes to do. 5 things, what's your husband's name?
Jose.
5 things Jose likes to do or wants to do, right? And when you're ready to have that date, and I also want to talk to you about day date. And don't always think that it has to be an evening date. Day dates. Those are great. Coffee shop, farmer's market, instead of the evening out. So let's say it's Jose's turn. So you pick out of Jose's jar. You picked
Okay.
what Jose wants to do and the opposite,
Mm.
so that you're doing something new and exciting. So we don't have to think that money has to be spent or that you have to go far away to get the individual time and space, right? One thing that I highly recommend for all of us that are working from home. Where am I right now? I'm outside.
Which, by the way, if you're not watching this, you're listening to the podcast. Lisa's background is so beautiful. She has palm trees behind her. It's just like gorgeous. Yeah.
And, grateful to be able to work toward receiving this in my years and efforts. This is a dream journal coming to fruition, that at this time or this season of our life, the outside from a holistic standpoint, I could go, this could be a whole nother podcast for you, but it's necessary. It's actually vital for your well-being to be sure that you're getting outside. And I would say, if you're not, I need you to start with 10 to 15 minutes a day, both of you.
Together, what would you suggest? Together, like walks together, or sitting
You
outside on the patio together? What does that look like?
Okay, so I have this thing called tree time. Where's your nearest park, or put the kids in a stroller, or they're going for a bike ride, like after dinner time. Just make sure that you are getting outside as much as possible for that well-being, your individual well-being, as well as a couple. And then I mentioned, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You find out what are the local parks right in our area. You could pick the top 10 local parks in our area and take an hour or a couple hours and just get outside. And then when you want to take a longer, okay, so what's within an hour for a night away? Because if mom and dad has the kids, if anything's happening, I've been doing a marriage retreat this is almost our 10th year now.
Oh, cool.
And it's happening in a couple weeks. And we kept it within an hour. It's in the DFW area, by the way, because I know about that. I wanted it to be far enough away where you felt like you were getting away as a couple, but I wanted it to be close enough in case something happened and you wanted to get back to the kids. And it's worked out wonderfully.
I love that you highlight that.
Yeah, nice destination. So that's retreating. You need to retreat.
Thank you for sharing that, because as I thought about this interview, I didn't consider that you would say go outside. I thought we talk about communication, we talk about, I don't know, and I think maybe because we are in Texas and we're about to enter my favorite season, October, where it's gorgeous outside. It's not cold, it's not hot. I think because it is so hot in the summer, I tend to have, for me at least, and I think probably for a lot of people, and especially when we're working from home, sometimes we don't get out. And every time I do, it feels great, even if it is a little warm, but I don't make it a priority. And so I love that you share that. We went outside and we were playing with our daughter outside. The baby was napping and we had music going, and it was just a beautiful, just
joyful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so nice. And I had this really a moment of deep gratitude. My daughter's like running around with my husband, and I flashed back because we built the home here. We picked the lot, and I just thought back to the moment where I used to picture our life on the lot. It was just like an empty lot. And I thought, this is where I'm going to bring my kids. And so as she's running around and I'm playing music and I'm just watching them, I just thought, oh, this is the moment that I envisioned. And we were just sitting outside, and that wouldn't have happened in the living room. If we were sitting inside, we just literally stepped right outside the sliding doors. There was something really special about that gave me a lot of gratitude.
Yes, that's beautiful. So it's really simple. Just get outside. You would ask for simple, small things. That's one simple thing that you can do. It's a gift that we have. We have this opportunity to go outside and receive some healing, but we don't do it.
Yeah, I just had she's going to be on the podcast this week on Thursday, but she talked about how sometimes we're so stressed out, and even just a 5-minute walk, we can come back feeling so refreshed and like things aren't as heavy. And I find that really to be true when we're really stressed out. Even just stepping away outside for a little bit can feel so healing.
I call them, it's actually called a state change, inside to outside. For us, again, that are working from home all the time, sitting down to standing up. Those people that created the stand-up desk, fantastic, because we were sitting down too much. But they're state changes. We're meant to move. We need to get the blood circulating. Your lymph system is your cleansing system.
Mm.
The oxygen that we're receiving from trees
Mm.
is very healing. So for you, who is in the area where I used to live,
Mhm.
if you haven't been to Irwin Park, you should check out Irwin Park. And
I'm not familiar with that.
yeah, it's a pre-Olympic mountain bike park
Mhm.
where they go to train,
Where is
but you
it?
can, it's in McKinney
Oh, in
off
McKinney.
of Lake
Okay.
Forest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And so that's where you get in the trees and the trails, which you don't find much in Texas, right? Because it's mostly prairie land. So
Mhm.
when you can find these parks where you get the shade of the trees and it's cool, it's a little cooler. My friends have been telling me you've been waking up to the 60s. We have too, which has been fantastic. And see how everybody gets excited,
We're so excited about the weather.
right?
It's going to cool tomorrow, and I'm so excited about it. High of 80 versus high of 90, which is
Yeah, I'll miss my fireplace. It was so funny because it was the first, when it was the 40s or 50s, those of us that had fireplaces lit a fire and you posted your picture of your fire, right?
Yeah. So Lisa used to live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and now she's in Florida. So thank you for sharing that recommendation. I actually hadn't heard of that park. So if you're in the Dallas area, or Irwin Park in McKinney.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. Well, is there any last thought that you'd like to share with someone who says, I'm ready, I'm excited, I'm listening to Lisa, I'm excited personally. I'm like, okay, where am I going to be more intentional? I'm going to do the day jar. I was already kind of brainstorming, what could I do? But what would you say kind of as the last thought to someone who's wanting to work on their relationship with their partner?
Reach out.
Mm.
If you're not where you
Yeah.
want to be,
Yeah.
reach out.
Mm. Yeah. Look for that support.
That is exactly right. There is support out there for you.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lisa. This is so helpful. So tell us, where can we find you? Where can people learn more about you? Where can people learn about working with you?
Yeah, so www.lisarjones.com is my website, and they can just cruise through there and see the different program offerings. And I also have a group coaching specifically for relationships coming up. It's called
Nice.
Peace.
Peace and pleasure.
Peace and pleasure.
Okay.
I chose that for this particular group coaching program. And I like to keep them manageable at 4 weeks because I honor people's time. But in relationships, we cannot let either one of those, we're meant to be still, right, in life and not be on the go, do so much, right? And pleasure. We are meant to experience pleasure. So peace and pleasure for this next group coaching
program. And that's
program.
launching on what day?
3rd week of October.
3rd week of October. Okay, great. Awesome. And you can find that on your website.
Yes. So, and if the landing page is not loaded there, then just shoot me an email at lisa@lisarjones.com and I can send the landing page for registration for that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. This is super helpful, and I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the invite.